let's talk about Mr. Beast. If you haven't been living under a rock over the past 2 weeks, then you probably know the general premise of what I'm going to say in this video. But if you have been off the internet or not really watch Mr. Beast anyways, I'm gonna give a brief rundown of pretty much everything that's going on and what that means for Mr. Beast. Now, unlike what some people think, given that I'm wearing this shirt, I'm not a Mr. Beast simp or anything. I got this 2 years ago from, shockingly, a promotional event where if you bought a shirt, your name would be put in a video, and my name was never put in the video, which, funnily enough, that happening goes along with some of the first allegations by Dogpack. In the first video posted 2 weeks ago that now has 12 million views, a lot of the claims go into discussion about Mr. Beast not only faking his videos, but conducting illegal gambling via promotional events and live streams that didn't exactly meet the criteria for legally gambling. Now, I did watch the Legal Eagle video about this, and whether the gambling was actually illegal or not seemed to be a bit questionable, but for the most part, it didn't really look like something that was allowed in good faith. As Dogpack mentions throughout the video, a lot of these gambling things were done in a very suspicious way, where pretty much, you know, it'd be a live stream, and then Mr. Beast or one of the other people would be like, in 5 minutes, we're gonna be putting $100 into a random order, we're gonna be putting an Xbox into a random order, blah, 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 and then it'd be like 7 minutes later, and they'd be going to say that they were doing that again, but not actually doing it the first time. And sometimes they'd remember, usually be like, oh wait, did we even do it for the first time? And then it's like, oh, well, in the next 30 seconds, then we're gonna put in a PS4 into a random order. So be sure to get a shirt so that you maybe have the chance of winning that. And oftentimes in live stream giveaways, that, by the way, there's really only clips of these, like the VODs essentially aren't released. If they are, I think like the one long VOD that exists is on Facebook, so there really isn't a whole lot of evidence of these happening in the first place, but I digress. A big issue with these is that not only would people receive, like, for instance, a fake signature caught by, I believe, Tyler doing on camera, and then Chandler kind of saw it and was like, bruh. They had a whole moment of, oh, we fucked up on camera, but then just kind of continuing with it anyways. But then not really many people saw the result of them winning something come into fruition. Like, there's someone still posting to this day about how, you know, they were in the chat and got informed that they won something and they never received it. A lot of the random giveaway stuff just never really seemed to, like, lead to random people getting anything. It was either people somehow related to Mr. Beast, whether like family members of friends or employees, or, you know, just kind of ways that would benefit him as a creator. Those people would win things, sure, but would random strangers win a lot of things? Not usually. And in many instances, the random subscribers who were brought into his videos weren't random. The 100 boys versus 100 girls who will win video, a lot of the girls were employees of Mr. Beast and got out, like, super fast. Because, I don't know, they had jobs to work, they had things to do, and they were just there to serve as bodies. That might be in the next video, I genuinely cannot remember. I watched them both, by the way. First one is just, really, it's just saying that videos are faked. Which, you know, anyone above the age of 14 who is involved in content in any way and used more than 5 brain cells to think about it, like, it's kind of obvious that though not all things are faked, a lot of things are faked. And unfortunately, a lot of those faked things are signatures, giveaways.
Somebody screamed in chat, I want a Switch!
Hey,
buy a shirt.
And to build off of that clip, by the way, if there's some kind of like a disclaimer that's like no purchase necessary, it's either just not really mentioned at all or in like some kind of super tiny text type way, because a lot of the promotion was like, if you buy a shirt, you'll get this, and that was kind of the vast majority of the promotion, which is kind of part of what it made it sort of illegal. And something else that was mentioned in this video but not talked about a whole lot was the Feastables and the whole thing where a lot of the advertising that went along with Feastables was that they were essentially like a better option to Hershey's, something to like combat obesity in America and things like that. When it's like, in reality, not only was the way that it was marketed to essentially drive people into chocolate aisles and to also, you know, harass poor Walmart employees to be like, you know, reorganize this thing, but it was just generally kind of like doing the opposite. Like, I got one Feastables and I ended up eating the bar over a few days. Maybe it was like 3-4 days. And just earlier, actually, I watched this food theory video about Mr. Beast Feastables and the testing that went along with it that used a lot of psychology. And now, this is something that Mr. Beast and his team uses a lot. They're very aware of the psychology that goes into marketing, that goes into promotion, whether they try to pretend that they're naive to this or not. Ultimately, there's more effort that goes into psychologically manipulating the audiences than there is to having an HR for the Mr. Beast as a company. Manipulating an audience, in, you know, as evil as it sounds, it is ultimately part of what goes into being a creator. It's such a huge part of marketing alone, and then also of things like titles, like thumbnails, like the way you dress, the posts you have on social media that kind of supplement the main thing, which is usually either YouTube or live streaming on YouTube or Twitch. And there's a lot of psychology and statistics that goes into it. For instance, right now I'm getting a major in behavioral neuroscience, and a lot of the courses are psychology based, and so much of what I learn in that can be applied to daily human behavior, which can then be applied to making videos. It allows me to essentially know more things about how the marketing of videos and of products work, which is a major component of what was used in Feastables. The food theory video really goes into depth with this, so I'm gonna try and briefly summary. Basically, there's multiple different biases. In countries that read left to right, there's always going to be an inherent bias to see A more, essentially in this example. You read it A to B, and then your brain goes back to look at A again, and then it's like, oh, there isn't anything more there, but you look at A more, which then a brain just kind of creates an internal subtle bias towards preferring A simply because it's being observed more. In a similar fashion, when things are lined up in a left to right order, like from the person's perspective, this is left to right, the first thing in that order does two things. The first thing that it does is it acts as like a baseline creator. So whatever's after that, it's going to be sweeter or more bitter. It's going to be more rich or less rich. Is always going to be a comparison to that first one. And then the second one, primacy bias, where pretty much the first thing will always be, at least a little bit, simply because it's first. And you know, in your brain, you associate first being good, you know, first place, first pick, first choice, blah, blah, blah. And so because of the way that Mr. Beast, like, testimony videos were created, is that it designed Feastables to come out on top very consistently, because not only was it on the left and the first of all the chocolates tried, but then right after that came 75% cacao, which is dark chocolate, which most people don't prefer. Now, I personally love dark chocolate, but it's definitely more bitter than milk chocolate, and so when everything else is milk chocolate, and so then you have the Mr. Beast Feastables milk chocolate followed by Lindt dark chocolate, which then, you know, people are like, oh, you know, that's kind of a more bitter taste, and then it's followed by more sweet things, then that boosts up the taste buds. Because then not only have they already started adapting to the chocolate flavor, so whatever additional flavor of chocolate that comes, you know, in contact, it's going to seem more diluted. But then it's coming right after the bitter, so then it's like, oh, it's better, but not as good as the first one. Because that first one, it's that, you know, that first bite of something you get, and it's like almost always the best. That's because it's before the taste buds have adapted to the flavor being consumed, essentially. So it's always going to seem better than whatever follows it, even if it's the same thing, even if it's a slightly different thing. And this becomes very apparent in the food theory video when these experiments were conducted again with multiple people at the Theory Studios, not necessarily just food theory. They brought in some other people. They switched the order around. They didn't have everything starting with Feastables, and they also included Hershey's this time, which is an interesting thing because Mr. Beast consistently was like, this is better than Hershey's, yet in this tier list Hershey's consistently did much better than Feastables. I think the conclusion that they came to is that, like, Feastables averaged third place. Feastables marketing itself was designed in a way to not only make the problems of, like, trying to defer from obesity and reduce that, blah, 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 like, it just made it worse, and then also promotes itself as the best chocolate in the world when that's not true, and then also doesn't even live up to the hype. Like, I think it was either the crunch one or the almond one. Wasn't that good. And I eat a lot of chocolate. Like chocolate is my go-to thing. Like, I don't eat candy, I just eat chocolate. So the fact that I even tried this and was like, that's not that good? I feel like that says a lot, given the amount of chocolate I've consumed in my life. And seeing the thumbnail for this other food theory video as well about Mr. Beast Burger failing, which we all well know by this point happened, where, and I watched Eddie Burback's video about this, where it involved ghost kitchens, and the quality wasn't being checked at all, and I never ordered a Mr. Beast burger. I had the app, never got a burger, cause I'm not sure why. I just didn't. COVID wasn't getting out much, I guess. Really had no reason to, like, pick up the burger on the way to somewhere, because I never was going somewhere. But that failed miserably after the quality was, like, so questionable, and then so much was being operated out of ghost kitchens, which were an absolute mess during COVID, and then even more so after COVID. Like, it just was not at all the way things were advertised, and people were like, dude, we're getting fucking ripped off, so essentially shut down. It was a failure. Also, manipulating, which goes so much deeper than just the Mr. Beast burger and the Feastables. It was also something that just happened on a regular basis in their videos with manipulation of the contestants in some way, shape, or form. And then, you know, manipulating video results. Months ago, back in, I think it was November, I made a video about Rosanna Pansino and her involvement in the Mr. Beast video, where she placed second, Quackity placed first, and then they were both moved down. She brought up a whole bunch of things where it was like, it was said that we couldn't hide in the air vents. Well, Zach hid in the air vents and then wasn't called out for that at all. And so I made a video kind of on the aftermath of that, because it was absolutely absurd, the level of harassment she got over 2 weeks, and then it, like, literally didn't even matter anymore. She's back. People were very much so favored. Certain contestants are favored in Mr. Beast videos, and I think this becomes, you know, obvious when we see, like, the same people kind of returning again and again, even in, like, large group videos, like, you know, the other YouTuber friends, will win stuff. The random people won't. The YouTuber friends will. This is something that people see. Really, the kind of climax of his manipulation of participants can be seen in Dogpack's second video, which, by the way, Dogpack, if you see this, maybe don't do the content cop humor. It's making a lot of people think this is like very not serious. But this guy, I missed him. I used to watch Beast Reacts, which, by the way, I would like to say, I do watch Mr. Beast. Now, not quite as much as I used to, because back when I was mainly watching him was when COVID was happening, and I didn't have a care in the world or a thing to do, and I consumed a ridiculous amount of YouTube every single day. But he was on Mr. Beast Reacts with Chris quite a lot, Ava Chris Tyson. It then just kind of disappeared. And now I don't know who else remembers this, but members suddenly disappearing was kind of like a thing that happened with Mr. Beast and co a lot. This happened with Jake. Jake Weddle and Jake the Viking. Gosh, who else did this happen with? I think it was Tyler, and then just like a few other random people where it'd be like they'd seem very involved in the content and then just suddenly not be there. And people would wonder why. They'd be tweeting about it. There'd be online discourse. People would be like, in the comments, like, where'd this person go? We miss them. And there'd really be, like, no addressing of it. I think with Jake the Viking, it was vaguely discussed. What I remember my brother and I discussing was that he wanted to do his own thing and Mr. Beast wasn't vibing with it, so then he left to do his own thing, and everyone was like, Jake, you're crazy, you are literally never gonna be successful on your own, or as successful on your own as you could have been if you just stuck with Mr. Beast. Well, then it turns out that it was his brother who was like on the list of convicted pedophiles and did some bad things, and he was there working for Mr. Beast, like wearing a mask, like a literal mask, which I think is somewhere in this Dogpack video. I'm like 90% sure it's in here somewhere towards the end, because the vast majority of this was Jake Weddle's experience, which is horrific. By the way, to go back to psychology stuff, I know a lot of people really were struggling to take this seriously. And this was, I watched Hassan's video about this, where he discussed in stream, and his chat was being absolutely awful. I've seen just kind of some other opinions about this. He seemed to be, playing it up for the camera, and no way, a lot of this was real, and blah, blah, blah. And to start off, joking about trauma is a thing that people do very commonly. It's difficult to come face to face with bad experiences as being as bad as they are. There's a reason that there's repressed memories, multiple personality disorders, and memory loss issues. Things like that are involved somehow with trauma suppression, especially since Jake is a comedian. This is very much so a coping mechanism for him. Clearly is traumatized by his experience. Why would discussing sleep disorders and crying about trauma and trying to get through it via joking, which is a way of coping with trauma, why is that a bad thing? Why do you think that amounts to not taking it seriously? I get that some of the way that this video was edited makes it not feel particularly serious, but it's very serious what happened to him. And to kind of try and enunciate how serious it is, one of the really big things that Jake mentioned was that he was the main character of a solitary confinement video, and one of the biggest struggles that he had was that the lights weren't being turned off, and then he didn't have clocks, so he had no perception of time. Now, two things to go into that. The first thing being, humans die when they don't sleep. Other creatures die when they don't sleep. There was an experiment done before there were really a whole lot of rights, animal rights and human rights in the scientific field, but there was an experiment done on rats where there were two rats, and they were on a platform. And if they started to fall asleep, one of them was kind of like allowed to take short rests, but the other one was dunked into water every single time it started to fall asleep. Now, rats hate water, so it would wake up and try and climb back onto the platform to get out of the water. And I believe it was after 5 days, the rat that wasn't allowed to sleep died. It died. So those scientists don't really know what sleep does. Fitness people particularly know very well that it's super important to resetting the body and making sure that you're, physically fit and recovering both mentally and physically. It's known that it is positive impacts on how people function, but nobody really knows why and what exactly sleep does. But the really important part about this is that without sleep, you will die. So the fact that he was left with the lights on the whole time is insane, because part 2 of that, the circadian rhythm, it's not strictly light and darkness dependent, but it's more dependent on light than it is for darkness. In more experiments, creatures who were kept in complete darkness were still able to maintain a circadian rhythm of about, I think it was 12 hours. They'd be like, or no, I think it'd be 24 hours. They'd be awake for like 12 hours and asleep for 12 hours. So like there is some kind of internal clock thing happening. But the body is also influenced by the presence of light. Like the presence of light signals, okay, it's time to get up and be awake now. And then the lack of light signals, okay, it's time to go to sleep now. It's kind of how it works naturally. So yes, there is an internal clock aspect, but that comes more into play when it's dark. When you're surrounded by complete darkness. But when you're not only surrounded by really freaking bright lights all the time, that's not only going to keep you awake, keep most people awake. To the person in the comments who was going to say, oh, I could sleep no matter how light or how dark it is, blah, 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 shut the fuck up. Nobody asked, okay? That's not what's important right now. We now know humans die without sleep, okay? We know that humans die without sleep. And that the circadian rhythm, which is in charge of sleep, is light dependent more so than dark dependent. Then you can kind of come to the conclusion, based off of that, being in lights all the time could literally be deadly due to lack of sleep. Like, yes, did he get some sleep? He did. He did get some sleep, and then was promptly told at like 3 in the afternoon when he was finally sleeping to run a marathon.
We got a real snoozer over here, an actual snorer. We got a real nap maxer over here, man. A professional sleeper over here, dude. Chat, is this guy resting up or?
Which is insane. Look, I have an aunt who runs marathons, and she trains months for those. She trains like all the time in running. Who am I kidding? She's constantly training running and biking. And so to then ask him to just run a marathon without any good equipment. They didn't specify what they did or didn't give him, but judging by the amount of, blisters on his feet and how he was feeling afterwards, it wasn't a whole lot. And then to not have any proper training beforehand, like that's an insane thing to do. And Mans is also running off of like 3 hours of sleep for, however many days he had already been in this hell. To then it be like run a marathon for the money is so much of this doesn't take into consideration how the human body works, and it's absurd. I quite frankly am glad that a lot of this is coming out, because not only will it almost then seem to be acceptable for future generations, i.e. the kids watching this, if it's not discussed as being a bad thing, then they'll be like, oh, this is okay to do to someone because they didn't die. Like, just because they didn't die doesn't mean it was okay. Doesn't mean they didn't get close. Doesn't mean they weren't at risk. It just means that they didn't go over the edge. Ludwig mentions this in his Mogul Mail video. Let me find it. There's a documentary that you should watch. It's called Nasubi. And pretty much he was like kept naked in this apartment for, I think it was like over a year or something, as he was trying to like win everything he could to live off of newspaper ads. And he could choose to leave at any point. And this was something that people said a lot with Jake, where it was like, well, you know, you could leave at any time. So why didn't you? Back with the previous, you know, psychology manipulation things and whatnot. Like, Mr. Beast and his team know very well how to manipulate people and how to manipulate kids in particular, but child psychology can work on the vast majority of people even after they're grown up. Like, child psychology isn't just for children. It's for the subconscious. It's for getting people to do what you want them to do, essentially. Similar to this, where it was like, he's in this and he needs the money, so he doesn't want to leave. And, you know, he even said himself that he wasn't able to leave immediately because then, you know, they brought in family and friends and people he liked and like blah blah blah, which is just messed up on so many levels. Like, there's so many messed up aspects that go into this, and it really boggles my mind. As someone who is literally in school for psychology and neuroscience related things, this upsets me. Now, does this mean that it's the end for Mr. Beast? No. From a moral standpoint, and this is something that Ludwig mentioned in his Mogul Mail video as well, it's kind of expected of Mr. Beast from friends, from creators, from family members, and from a lot of the public, to make a statement about everything. And he said he'll make one after Dogpack's third video. But as Hassan Piker mentioned in the video that he made about Dogpack's video, Mr. Beast is still an incredibly influential figure. Even after all of this came out, this guy still has 309 million subscribers. Okay? A video he posted 7 days ago still has 135 million views. He could quite literally continue doing this until he decided to stop and never say anything about it and still pull in views. That's the reach he has, especially since, you know, he hasn't addressed this online discourse, and so many of his fans either, well, one, there's just a lot of alt accounts subscribed because people do that. Two, it's people who don't really have social media outside of YouTube, maybe. Like, you know, not as many people have Twitter as have YouTube, obviously. And so especially since a lot of the discourse is happening in places like Twitter, like Reddit, like other creators, YouTube comments who aren't as large, he could literally not say anything and it would draw less attention to him than saying something would. And I think it's going to say a lot about Mr. Beast the person if this is addressed or not. Because a lot of what's happened is Mr. Beast the YouTuber, Mr. Beast the corporation, Mr. Beast the guy who would be willing to do anything to get to the top of the YouTube space. But he's kind of at the top now. I think people are going to see a lot more of what Mr. Beast, the person, the human being who can actually relate to people sometimes, who he really is. Whether he addresses all of the allegations or not will, quite frankly, be relatively inconsequential to what happens to him and his channel. Because even if he tweets something, you know, how many, do you really think that all 309 million of his subscribers have Twitter? X? Do you think that they all have Reddit? Or Instagram? Or Facebook? I don't even know. So it's like, in reality, even if he addressed this on another platform, what that would do to his main channel is probably inconsequential. I don't think he'll post a video about it. I genuinely do think that at most it'll be like a Twitter thread, maybe a Google document. So it's gonna say a lot about, I think, you know, his moral standpoint as a person with how this gets addressed, if at all. But a lot of creators around him are kind of like, dude, this is fucked up. This is messed up. A lot of people talking about it are like, this is messed up. So what he does as a response, it is currently in question. And it probably won't dictate anything about the future of Mr. Beast, except that he is either more credible or significantly less credible and trustworthy than he was before. As upsetting as it is, at the end of the day, it is probably pointless. In the scheme of his YouTube channel, in the scheme of the amount of money he makes, in the scheme of the videos he makes. Because there's still going to be enough Ride or Die fans who will go compete in the videos, and who will go play his games, and who will buy the merch, and participate in the illegal gambling, and buy Feastables, and hope that Mr. Beast Burger would come back. Like, there's still always going to be those people. Now, whether the involvement with big creators shifts or not, I think that's probably the only major impact we'll see, is like, you know, how involved he is with other creators. Like, Ludwig was going to partnership with him, but then pulled out because he was like, dude, what's going on with this? Whether we see more of the Ludwigs of the YouTube space doing that or not will probably be the result of what Mr. Beast has to say about everything. So with that being said, don't psychologically torture people who look up to you, because that's bad. Bye.